appropriate time for us to talk about the times that we don't feel like treasure. Life has a way of making you and humbling you, but it also has a way of allowing the enemy to get into your mind sometimes, to get into some of your conversations. And my goal for today's wrap up is to talk about a time that I felt like buried treasure. I'm not going to go too deep into my testimony, not because I don't trust you, because I do. At this point, I've given you all things, but because I want to respect the time that we have. And I think when it is time for me to fully have that conversation, we will have more in depth of a relationship. But today, I'd like to give you a high overview. 2 years ago, I had a health scare, and that health scare really required me to sit down for 22 days. And in those 22 days, I'm going to tell you mentally, emotionally, the things that I went through. Thankfully, my mother and my aunt and my friends and family and Dr. Parker were in my life at that time, but it took, I would say, about 6 months before I was able to get back to here. In those 2 years ago, I remember being in the hospital for 10 days and hearing that I was never going to be able to do what I'm doing right now today, and let alone all of the things that I have done in these 2 years, thanks to the Jesus that we serve. But what I wanted to talk about today, and we can go ahead and go to the first slide, is 4 tips to reconnect to the power source when life makes you feel like buried treasure. No, that title probably changes from the one that you've read, so it's still the same message, but God brought this to me this week, and I wanted to be obedient to that. We're going to go ahead and start with the first point. I'm going to give you a total of 4 of those things that I did mentally in that space to be able to realize that I was not, in fact, buried treasure and that the devil is a liar. And I hope that in this conversation, we're able to have that together. The first point that I want to bring up is governing your thoughts by centering your world around holy influences. A lot of times you don't realize that when your mind is thinking one thing and your body goes in another direction, that you don't realize that you were actually designed to do that. What do I mean by that for those of you that are listening? Have you ever said that you were going to give up eating after a certain time, and then next thing you know, it's 7, 9 o'clock and you're already eating after you told yourself that you were not going to do that? Or have you ever said, you know what, I need to stop taking this route because every time I come this route, someone's driving slow, there's a police officer, there's just stuff. And then somehow you find yourself navigating on that road. Or let's bring it bigger. You tell yourself you're going to stop shopping, but then somehow you end up in the store because there were things you needed and you were going to go in there for one thing, but you ended up with a whole bunch of things, right? These little small habits, and you're wondering, why is it that when I have told myself and I'm in agreement and I know that I should stop doing certain things or having certain thoughts in my head, for some reason my mind just ruminates on these negative thoughts? Maybe it's a different conversation. Maybe instead of it being something that you said you were going to stop doing, it's something that keeps repeating negative about you. When I was in that 2-year point a couple of years ago, and I kept hearing those doctors say that I was not going to be able to speak or walk around or live the life as we know it, my mother was so strong during that time, but in my mental mind, all I kept hearing is that I was damaged goods. All I kept hearing and thinking was that I wasn't worthy, and that's why God did this to me. And there are things that you all deal with, things that you read on these cards for the women that were in the room, that will make you be in a cycle over and over and over. I want to tell you what the word says about why that happens. So let's go ahead to our first scripture. Next slide. Galatians 5:17, verse 18 says, "For the desires of the flesh are against the spirit, and the desires of the spirit are against the flesh. For those are opposed to each other to keep you from doing the things you want to do." So that part of you that steps out and then steps back and goes back and forth, your body is designed to do that. So don't be hard on yourself when you're wondering why these habits are hard for you to break. You were designed to do that. That doesn't mean you can't overcome it, but it is natural for that to be a part of your life, right? Let's go and see what the word says about how you can break that cycle where you're double-minded, where you're going back and forth, where it feels like you're stepping out back and forth, right? Recycling those thoughts. Let's go to Luke chapter 11, verse 24. "Your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eyes are healthy, your whole body also is full of light. But when they are unhealthy, your body also is full of darkness." Surrounding yourself around positive things all of the time allows you, in the moments that it feels dark, in the moments that you feel like damaged goods, in the moments that you feel like buried treasure, for you to realize that it's because of what you're seeing, what you're listening to, that is actually on the inside of you. So for example, for those of you that might love to watch drama-filled TV shows, or maybe you're obsessed with certain things on social media, you can't do and consume that at all times. And then when you go through something thinking that your spirit is not naturally going to gravitate to what it's been seeing, what you've been feeding it, right? Your spirit and your mind are at war with one another. It is not something that we talk about often, but it is something as a woman you have to own. All of those emotions and all of those conversations that you have play in your head. Think about what you think about at nighttime when no one gets to know. God knows your private thoughts. So I know today I might be touching things that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I want you to think about when you are laying down and your head is touching that pillow and you are dreading getting up in the morning, all of those negative thoughts about what your worth is about, who cares about you, all of those negative thoughts is what recycles in your mind based off of what you just watched before you went to bed. Or maybe it's a conversation of you going to work. You can't listen to drama-filled talk shows and go to work thinking you're going to have a good day. It doesn't work like that. What you feed in your spirit is what goes into your mind. And so when you have that cycle of repeating negative things and you're wondering, why am I feeling this way? Why am I thinking these things? The person that is the hardest on you in life is you. It's the conversation that you never say out loud. It's the things that you hide. In this moment, I'm not telling you this because I'm talking bad about you. I'm telling you because I was my worst critic. I was the one that kept saying, well, I probably shouldn't speak anyways. I wasn't a good speaker. I probably didn't really love kids the way that I thought that I did. I was questioning every single thing in those moments because if the enemy can keep you there, you will never get to hear. It doesn't matter what part of your life you're in. I know this room is mixed generation. It doesn't matter if you've already retired. Guess what? If you're still breathing, God still has something for you to do. So this is a part of today that we're talking about when you don't feel like treasure, when you are wondering why you feel so engrossed in negative things. It is because of what you are feeding your spirit. And sometimes, let's be honest, you don't have to go search for something negative. It's everywhere. Every conversation. You can go in the grocery store with a good idea and get the wrong checker and change your whole day, right? Let's be honest. You can get in the car and have someone in front of you waiting to drive. I'm that person. I can't drive. But you have that person waiting, and that can change your whole mood. So I don't want you to feel guilty. I want you to remember what the word just says. One, that your spirit and your mind are in two different things. They are designed to be at war. But what you watch, what you consume is what feeds your spirit so that when dark things happen, when life happens, this is what you go back to. Let's go to my next point. Now, each one of these points, I'm going to actually give you something you can implement because I don't think it's fair to tell you what you didn't do. I'm going to tell you what I did during those moments. The first thing that I did was music. I couldn't really speak into sentences at the time, and this sounds kind of crazy, but my mother was really great about always having music on because if she didn't, my thoughts would overtake me because you can imagine waking up one day saying, hey, I think something bad's going to happen to me today, which is exactly what happened, and then something happened bad to me, and I woke up 3 days later, and I was in a hospital, and hearing that now I was so weak that I couldn't open a bottle of water, right? So weak that I couldn't even form a sentence. But I had just given a speech prior to this. So in my mind, I thought that was going to be the rest of my life, which is how some of those things happen. Maybe in this conversation that we're having, you don't have that testimony. Maybe your testimony is watching a loved one pass away or watching the change in your family dynamic or changing in your jobs. I want to give you some things that you can implement so that when life does make you feel like buried treasure, you can pour back to that. The first thing was a song. I would find a song to keep on repeat all the time because what we do know is that music influences us so good, right, and so bad. And so one of the things that I would play over and over is Yolanda Adams' Never Give Up, over and over and over and over. When I woke up in the morning, when I brushed my teeth, when I took a shower, in conversations, I'd have it in my little earpiece all day, all night, for all of those days on repeat because you've got to learn how to wipe out some of the noise. And most of the time when you find those songs and you sing them over and over, it starts to come into your conversation. If you don't believe me, think about when we all first heard Baby Shark. Okay? Even if you didn't like the song, you were like, do, do, do. It forced you to do it, right? That's how you've got to do. You've got to find your song. And I'm going to give you some advice. Don't make the song be a song that makes you cry. You are speaking to the joy that is supposed to be in the future. So whatever song you choose should be calling that out of you so that when it does come time for you to feel like you're in that dark space, you know exactly what words to use to fight the enemy, because that is the enemy's play. In your mind, it's his playground. He can't wait for you to open that door. And for my young girls that are here in the back, this conversation does not exclude you, baby girl. When your friend group stops being your friend and you're questioning if you should keep hanging out with them, if there's a secret that you're dealing with that you are not bringing to your mom, we are still talking to you. You should have a song that encourages you. You should have an artist that you're listening to daily that inspires you, so that when you have to speak in class and you're nervous, you don't sit there and be quiet. We want you to be brilliant. We're at this conference today, yes, for every woman in this room, but we're doing this because of you. We want you to be stronger, smarter, brighter, and have more opportunities than any of us have ever had. So this conversation does not exclude you. The second thing that I'm going to tell you to do is watch foreign films. Now, I'm going to give you some warnings with that. Don't go watch a drama foreign film, right? That's not what I'm asking. Go watch a foreign film or a Disney movie and watch it in mute. Read the words. Why am I telling you to do this? Because if your thoughts are so loud that even that song isn't helping, you've got to distract your mind. So you're going to watch something positive, you're going to read the text and watch it. It is hard to watch and listen and read at the same time and still have your thoughts so loud. Okay? You've got to shake up that spirit, because remember, your spirit has been dormant. Your mind has been going, right? So you've got to trick your mind a little bit to slow down. And you'll find once you get at peace doing that, and for all my moms and grandmas in the room, this is not a house group activity. This is you activity on your own, okay? Snuggle up in a chair, find your quiet time, and watch you something that you can learn from. For those of you that were in the session earlier, I talked about Disney Queens. I watched that entire documentary silent. That's why I was able to repeat it to you so, eloquently earlier, because sometimes you don't realize you need to even teach yourself new vocabulary. Watch something positive, silent, read it out loud while you're watching it until you can grab hold of your thoughts. Let's go to my second point. The second point is learn what spiritual characteristics you need to activate God's power. Now, I know a lot of times as Christians, when we're going through something, our favorite saying is, but God got me. I know I'm going to make it through. God is good, right? That is great. But I want to show you what the word says of the actual steps in order that you should be implementing in your life to really activate God's power in you, right? We're talking about being buried. We're talking about the times that it's dark in your world. We're talking about when life has gotten so heavy, so overwhelming, and you just don't know what it is that you're supposed to do. You can't even articulate it in words. I want to tell you what the word says in order what you should be implementing in your life. So for this one, I'm going to actually have you close your eyes, because I know you want to stare at me, and I love staring at you, but I want this to actually sink in, okay? So just for a second, if you have your Bible, you can also do that, but I'm going to read it to you twice. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, and then I'm going to skip down to 5 and 8. Verse 3 says, His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and goodness. Skipping down to verse 5 through 8. For this very reason, here's the order of what I want you to listen to, ladies. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love. Open your eyes for me. Of this order, godliness was number 5, meaning when you are going through something, God is not asking you to dress your best and be the best person that you can be while you're drowning inside. God's not asking you to give Him the biblical response to your problems first. The very first of the 5 was your faith, meaning it is your job to increase your faith. Not for you to just come to church and think the pastor's supposed to give you the word, or come to this conference and think it's going to last. When you leave here, you've got to do something to make it resonate on the inside of you. That is where it is your responsibility. Your relationship with God is a partnership. It is not a dictatorship. And so with that being said, I'm going to go back to finishing what it ends in that chapter, which is verse 8. For if you possess these qualities and continue to grow in them, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. What does this basically mean? I read you something long, okay? So let's paraphrase it. Christians, we are great at resulting to being godly when we're going through something. We are good at mentioning something to someone that's going on with us and then, oh, but it's fine, and smiling. And especially as a woman, when we're going through something, we look great. I mean, don't you spend more time in the mirror when you feel depressed? Don't you go spend more money during the time that you feel depressed? These are the times, right? We are used to doing that. But what God is telling you to do in this moment is that when you are actually struggling, that's when your faith, your self-discipline, all of those things are required, and then you get to godliness. We also admit to going to serve others when we're struggling, which is a great thing to do. But if you look at the characteristics, that wasn't first on the list. First, you've got to be able to pour into you, right? As women, it is hard to put ourselves first, but the word is not telling us to serve everyone else first. Because if you're really going to serve, if you're going to be that role model that we talked about, and for the young girls in the back, you may think, I'm looking for mom, I'm looking for auntie, I'm looking for my teacher to affirm me. God is wanting you to know that you have the power to affirm yourself. Yes, we are here to help you, but you've got to have the desire more than we do. Okay? Let's go ahead to the two things that you can, one more word. So Psalms 119, verses 103 through 105. How sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. I gain understanding from your precepts. Therefore, I hate every wrong path. Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path. What does that mean? When you are going through something and you are looking for how to activate God's power in this moment inside of you, you have to realize that the only way the word is going to be sweet is if you actually read it during the times that you're not struggling. Meaning it's not read a verse a day to keep the devil away. That's not how it's going to be sweet to you, okay? I'm going to tell you two things that you can implement to make the word sweet, to have that list that we just heard, those qualities and characteristics in order. Here are the two ways that I'm going to tell you that. Two ways that you can increase those spiritual traits. The first one is you've got to romanticize your relationship with God. What do I mean by that? For how many women, just by a show of hand, are married? Can you imagine on your first date getting out of bed, not taking a bath or brushing your teeth, going to meet your husband and you knew he was your husband? No. Think about the ladies in the back that are younger. Can you imagine going to the first day of school, rolling out of bed without brushing your teeth or finding your first outfit that you're going to wear? No. That's how you have to romanticize your relationship with God. When it is time for you to read the word, when it is time for you to get into that word, you've got to think of God writing the Bible just for you. He is a big enough God that you can be selfish in your time with him. He has written you personal instructions and little love notes on how to get through every single negative thing that the world is going to bring to you, including you. Because let's be honest, sometimes we're the worst critic in our life, right? We are in our telenovela and we are the villain, okay? So you're going to have to romanticize that. I'm going to tell you something that you can do to romanticize that relationship. Something that my friend and I that's sitting in the audience came up with is pause 22. Every single day for 22 minutes, spending time with God, completely pausing in that moment. No distractions, no text messages, no social media, but in that pausing for 22 minutes, it's not just reading the word. It's cleaning your bed if you're going to do it in your room and making sure that your room is nice. It's making sure that you listen to worship music before you actually open the word. It's sitting outside in God's holy presence and looking at the world that he has created and then reading the word. Making it like it's a date that you can't be late for, you can't miss, and you can't be distracted for. Remember, I talked about earlier, you are romanticizing your relationship with God, which means that when you were reading the word and you were on your little date, you don't have time for a phone call. This is your husband, okay? This is the first day of school. You got to be cute. This is the time that you are going to spend with God and doing it for 22 minutes until it becomes a habit that you look forward to. And you'll realize that you start with 22 minutes, and that might sound hard, but you'll end up getting to an hour. You'll end up getting to all day, which is the goal, that really you're talking to God all day. But you start off with these small things. When I was going through my situation, I was already doing Pause 22, and like Dr. Parker mentioned, I was already going to church on Saturdays. And so I knew, even though I couldn't drive, my mom had to drive me around at that time, I knew that I needed to get into that church. I knew that I needed to get into doing my Pause 22, because what I did know is that my thoughts were too loud. What I did know that what was around me, the characteristics that I needed to unite in me, meant that I really had to trust my faith. I had to ask, Kristen, would you still follow God if you never walk and never get to talk again? Kristen, would you still follow God if you never can drive and never finish school again? If you have to put this business on the side and give it to someone else, would you still believe that God has something for you? These are the questions that you ask when your marriage is going down. These are the questions that you ask when you see that your children are not following Christ the way that you thought. These are the things when you're having conflict with your mother or your father and you're questioning your friend groups. These are the questions. And you won't ever have the answers from the outside world. You are going to have to get that from the source, and the only way those words are going to sound sweet to you is if you're actually reading them during the time that you're not suffering. Let's go to my third point. I only have 4 for those of you that want to know. All right, so women, this is going to be the hardest one of the points. Operate before you congregate. Be consistent before you mention it. When I wrote this, I actually was trying to be a rapper, and it kind of, if I read it again, you'll be able to see. Operate before you congregate. If I could sing like your pastor, I would really, who knows? That's why God didn't give me that gift, okay? But I want to tell you, one thing that you have to do as women and be very cautious of is all the talking that we do. Sometimes you're talking so prematurely that you don't even realize you are casting spells and doubt more than you are casting affirming in what God has called you to do. Sometimes when you are doing something and God has shown you a vision, because you're so nervous about the vision, you go get confirmation. But sometimes those people that love you the most, because they didn't have the vision, they're going to give you the wrong advice, not because they don't love you, but because you couldn't even really articulate what it is that God has shown you that you need to do. You couldn't even articulate what you're really going through, because let's be honest, when we're having conversations with our girlfriends, we always leave half of the conversation out. Let's be honest, right? There's some of that story that you don't admit to, right? But God gets to see all of it. And so sometimes when you are going through something, you can't pick up the phone and call whoever it is or have those conversations. You can't have a group meeting about something that God is taking you through. If it involves them, yes. But if you are the person that is going to be going through it yourself, you have to be able to sit in the silence of what you're supposed to do, create a plan, and actually implement it before you go talk to people. It's kind of like when you come and try on 2 different outfits and you ask one of your friends or your family members to choose. When you really have the one that you want to wear, you present it differently, don't you? You're like, what do you think about this? Yeah, like this, what, like this? But when you try on that second one, what do you think about this? Well, I mean, it's all right. I mean, it's kind of, that's how you present things that God has told you to other people, right? Well, what do you think about me going back to school? What do you think about me retiring? What do you think about me taking a step back and letting my kids make their own choices, right? How are you presenting it to others when it's so in its raw form, right? Let's go to see what the word says about this. James chapter 1, verses 2 through 8. Consider it a sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that under pressure, your faith life is forced into the open and shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work in you so you become mature and well-developed, not deficient in any way. If you don't know what you're doing, pray to the Father. He loves to help. Did you hear the last part of that? Pray because he loves to help. How often are we trying to be God in our own life or in others? How often are we trying to say, okay, God, you said he's a bad guy, but I think that if I give him some love and help and support, he might be the right one. Okay, God, you said this is a bad job, but maybe, the salary, it's close to home. You start questioning, right? Maybe those friend groups aren't really my friend. Well, maybe if I just be their friend sometimes, right? We're always trying to bargain with God because we don't know. So when you start talking to other people about the things that God has shown you or what you're questioning, you don't realize that you're not even giving them the full information, nor do they have the full picture, nor will they ever. Even if you're mom or grandma, you will never know what life is like when they go to school, right? Because they're not telling you that when they walk into school, they're a whole nother person. They're not telling you why that friend group is really not their friend. They're not telling you, right? And let's also be honest, sometimes self-awareness we don't have. So you don't even know what the issue is, right? Which is why sometimes you have to go to God and you have to learn to be in a habit of going to him, asking questions, and then waiting for his answer. And for those of you that are younger in your faith, I want to tell you, sometimes no response is the response. Okay? Sometimes if you pray for something and you don't get an answer, that is the answer. The answer is no, and it's laughable, which is why God is not even presenting you with a no out loud. Right? Let's be honest, okay? Let's go to the next verse, still in James chapter 1. We're going to move to 26. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongue deceives themselves, and their religion is worthless. Did you hear that? Meaning when you can't stop talking or telling or congregating or mentioning it before you implement it, that is basically showing the world that you really don't believe in the God that you serve. Now, I want to be clear. No one's saying that you should have all things bottled up and never have a conversation. We're talking about when things are raw and you don't know what you should do. Learn to not have to talk about it, right? Because sometimes your talking can lead to positive and then it can lead to negative real quick. Let's be honest, right? The way our minds work, we already learned about that in the very first point. Your mind is naturally negative. You could see something positive and in the middle of that conversation, you're like, yeah, but it probably won't work out for me, so I'm just not going to do it. And then what's your person that's listening? Okay, girl, don't do it. That's what we say, right? Not knowing that that's what you're supposed to do. There are certain things that are very uncomfortable that you're going to go through in life, and those uncomfortable things requires you to get rooted into who God has called you to be, but it also requires you to dig your heels in, dig your sneakers in, and say, you know what? This is one thing that I have to actually do, and it may not be a responsibility, but I've got to do it. When I was going through my health scare, one of the things that my mom implemented every day because I was very weak and I couldn't walk, she would make me for 10 minutes get on the treadmill. I hated it, right? But do you think how happy I am that I'm on stage in my heels today because my mom made me walk in those 10 minutes? I'm saying that to you to say during that time I couldn't have conversations with people on the phone because their emotions would overtake my emotions and it would just feel like we're never getting out, right? Because when you're going through something, even when people love you, the first thing they say is, I'm so sorry for you. I want to pray for you. But they don't actually pray. But I'm going to pray for you. And you're like, no, pray for me right now in this moment. I need it right now, right? And they don't know. But if you didn't open the door to have that conversation until you were confident, you would know that whether they pray for you right then or pray for you when they walk away, you already know how to pray. So you're not codependent on them, right? Which is what God wants. Remember, he loves to help. Let's go to the things you can implement. Ways to become more consistent and to stop oversharing. The first is shift your perspective. A lot of times when we're doing something, for some reason, we have the idea that God is separating us from other people because they're bad. What if God has to send you through uncomfortable things to get you to have submission? Because you're too busy talking, playing, doing everything else other than what he asked you to do. And so there's a moment that he says, okay, it's April. Every April, I've been telling you what you need to do, but you don't do it. So every April, I'm going to rip those friends from you. Every April, I'm going to rip that job from you. Every April, I'm going to make you cry and have someone hurt your feelings. Every April, I've been telling you that you need to be a slower driver, but for some reason you don't. So every April, I'm going to make you have to wreck a car because you don't know how to sit down. Every April, I'm going to let someone chastise you and tell you that you're not smart so that you can get enough courage to realize you should be applying to college right now. You should be going to that work program right now. Maybe every April, he's going to have you have a disconnect with your family because every April, he's like, man, in June, I've got something good for you. And people are waiting for you to get to June. But because you are too afraid and you keep needing to talk to people before you actually implement it, you are hesitating. You've got to shift your perspective. Sometimes it's not them, baby girl, mama bear, sister, best friend. Sometimes it's you. And your perspective has to be shifted to see, why is God making it so uncomfortable for me until I walk forward? Without me having to sit down for those 6 months, as Dr. Parker mentioned, I would have never launched my app because it felt like too much work. But then God said, okay, I had the pandemic come. You had nothing to do. Still didn't write the app. Still didn't do anything. You know, it was kind of one of those things. But in that moment, I realized either you're going to be serious about it the minute that I said to God, okay, God, if you really want me to do this and you give me everything back, I promise I will. And I haven't looked back. I am more happy or more at peace today than I was when I was resisting. I don't know what God has asked you to do. I don't know what stage you are in your career or in your motherhood or in your family relationship or where you are with Christ, but he has something for you. Let's get to the second point. The second thing that you need to do to improve and stop oversharing is you need to start learning how to keep a secret. Now, I'm not telling you to keep something big for the girls in the room. I don't want you to be like, Kristen G's told me to keep a secret from my mom. No, I didn't. I said keep a small secret. What I'm telling you to do in this small secret is give something up and don't tell anyone. For those of you that are coffee drinkers, you could decide tomorrow that you're just not going to drink coffee for the whole day. And you don't have to tell it or announce it to anyone. And when someone says, hey, I made you a cup of coffee, oh, no, I'm good. You don't have to explain, and see if you can go the whole week without ever telling them why you gave up coffee. And then tell them next Sunday. Practice these little small things. And I know coffee is a small thing. Maybe it's something bigger. Maybe you decide you're going to go a whole day without cussing because you know that God actually wants to use you, but you keep saying things that you shouldn't say. Maybe it's you're going to stop hanging out with certain people and you're not going to tell them that you're not hanging out. You're just going to say, hey, this week I'm actually going to stay home. And you're going to get into the habit of staying home so that you can do whatever it is that God is asking you to do. Find something small every week, every month, every so often that you give up, that you are completely silent about. Now, let's be honest. I'm also not saying giving up a shower. Okay, let's stay in the beautiful treasure that God wants you to be, and he wants you to take a shower. But find something small that you can give up. And in that small thing that you give up, don't look at it as you are suffering. Now, this is different from you just fasting as a church. This should be something that you don't even tell your family about. You need to learn to keep certain things private, because the real part of unlocking that power, the real part of getting the light when you feel like you are being buried, is in your intimacy with God. And if you can't stop talking, God will never have intimacy with you the way he would like, right? It's like bedroom conversations for my people that are married, right? You can't have that conversation with God if you're telling everybody all the time. Ask why you're telling, because sometimes the enemy wants you to keep talking so you never get moving and you get discouraged by all the people you're talking to, so you never actually implement it. But imagine if you're quiet about what God's doing in your life and you don't look like you're suffering. We do not have to look like what we're going through, okay? Let's go to my last point. The fourth is worthy. Daughter of the Most High God, you are worthy, and God never saw you as buried treasure. It is an easy thing to say that from this position, right? But I want you to realize in your own world, that worthiness that you're looking for, that validation that you've been seeking, that part of it, why am I not feeling important or worthy? That comes from God. That comes from the part of you that actually needs to be touched. For the women in the room, the activity that we had earlier, that comes from vulnerability. That worthiness, that also is the enemy's biggest tool. If he can make you feel like you are never worthy to receive God's full love, you'll never actually change. Each and every single one of us was created to solve a problem or to help someone solve a problem. So if you think that you are so weak or you are not valuable or your time is up, you will never get to the position you need to be in order to actually do that. You'll never even really be able to love the people in your life correctly until you realize you are worthy of not just giving love, but receiving the love back. God is your Father, and he actually wants you to have all the things that he has left for you. Let's see what the word says about that. In Psalms 139, verses 13 through 16, it says, you formed my most inner being. You knit me in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My very self you know. My bones are not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, fashioned in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw me unformed. In your book, all are written down. My days are shaped before one came to be. That's a lot, but let me paraphrase what they're saying. God knew you before your parents even knew that they even wanted to have you. God knew you when you were naked, when you weren't formed. And so you don't have to be at this stage of your life hiding the parts of you that are dark, hiding the parts of you that are insecure, hiding the parts of you that are dealing with anxiety. Do you know why we are all dealing with anxiety right now? Because of the pandemic that caused us to be at home. That was a global detox for all of us. It forced every single generation, every single race, no matter where you were social class-wise, to have the same conversation, experience the exact same thing at at the exact same time, that is not by accident. That was God's moment to have a revival with you. That was God's moment to sit you down, to wake you up. And for my young babies that feel like you missed out on something, that was the moment that you could actually see your parents and heal in those relationships. Stop allowing society to tell us that that was the worst time. Yes, people died during that time. Yes, things happened during that time. But you know what? You lived during that time. And so for all the people that you lost, this is still your opportunity to go live for them, okay? When we talk about God forming you in your mother's womb, he already knew what gifts and talents he was going to give you. So regardless of where you are in your walk of life, I don't want you to look here and think that everyone else, it applies to everyone else but you. You are a treasure, but guess what treasures do? Treasures get locked in security boxes. So there are some times in some seasons that yes, you are not around other people. Yes, no one has access to you. But guess what? It's because God's got you in his witness protection program, and he knows that if you were able to use the phone, you tell everybody where you are, right? You tell everybody everything that's going on. There are certain things that God needs to do in you, no matter your age. And in those things that he needs to do in you, you have to believe that you are worthy of receiving and that he is a God that has never lied to you, has never failed to you, and he actually will come through with what you asked him for. Let's go to the word and see what it says about this. This is my favorite scripture and probably one that we overlook as women. Matthew 7, verses 7 through 8 says, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And the one who knocks, the door will be open to you." The question I'm going to ask you internally is, have you actually asked God what you're really looking for? I'm not talking about money or friends or marriage. I'm talking about, have you actually asked him? And when he answers you, are you bold enough, courageous enough to answer that call? Because if you're still breathing, he expects you to do something. How bold are you in your ask? Do you even believe that you're worthy of him having a calling for you? I was like that. We all at some point in our journey have been like that. This is the moment that you have to ask yourself, God's listening. He loves to help. Do you want to spend all of your time complaining and talking to God about where he isn't helping? Or do you want to ask him to actually give you what it is that you need? Because until you can articulate it, remember the word says write it down and make it plain. Until you can articulate what it is that you need from God, he can't give it to you. And until you can sit still and govern those thoughts more than your emotions, but actually allow your spirit to shine through, he can't give it to you. It's close. He's just 10 minutes up the road waiting for you. Last slide. Now, I could have given you some points on worthiness, but I decided that because this is a women's conference, and let's be realistic, I don't know what areas you're struggling in worthiness. But one thing that I did do that I'd like to show you is, I think a lot of times when we're reading the word and we look at some of these women on the screen, their stories, the ones that we hear about so often, the thing that these women have collectively, even though their stories don't usually intertwine with one another, is that they all had the courage to answer the call. That even when they were dealing with some of the most scariest things in their journey, they actually still found a moment to ask God for help. In your life, there were women that were here to help you. But also, these women are our ancestors. We shouldn't be worshiping them more than God, but we should definitely look at the blueprint of the things that they did. Collectively, what all of these women have together is that they didn't give up. Collectively, what they all had together is that they didn't take on the opinions of other people. They didn't take on all of the weight of the rest of the world. Whatever their assignment was specifically, they did it, even if it took years before it came to pass. So I'm going to ask all of you, I want you to close your eyes for a minute. And I want you to think about, what is it that God is actually asking of you? And what is it that you're actually asking of God? He wants to answer you. He does not see you as hidden or broken treasure. He sees you as the daughter of God. He sees you as royalty. How can you start to see yourself as that? Thank you.